Imperial Uncle. Chapter 52. I pull the door open and head outside. I'm suddenly reminded that Kijhi called me just like that 10 years ago too. He'd just succeeded to the throne, a child who'd just lost his father, dressed in formal courtwear with his little face all tied with anxiety, his eyes full of wariness for whomever they were pointed at. Someone once gifted a snow leopard to the Prince Hawaii estate. It was young, just weaned. Supposedly, if we gave it fresh meat and raised it, it could have been taken along on hunts. That young leopard would shrink back into a corner of the cage, not making a single move or sound, and the look in its eyes was exactly the same as Kijhi's at the time. When he was holding the heirloom seal with both hands and stamping documents with it, his hands were very steady. When he said things like "You may rise and you may present your memorial," his voice was also quite calm. He was in the imperial study every time I went to see him, but when I came in, there would either be nothing on his desk or some inconsequential light reading. I knew the Dowager Empress must have told him something. His attitude towards me and the way he spoke to me was always properly serious. "Thank you for coming to see us, Imperial Uncle. We are in good health. Nothing important has happened of late, please do not take the trouble to concern yourself." So on and on. He was no longer the way he was when he came visiting at the estate. Occasionally, I'd go out of my way and bring some rare item to amuse him with. At first, he couldn't help himself but to stare. I'd then do the same thing I always did before, and offer him the item. "Do you like this, Your Majesty?" He'd reply modestly, "Thank you, Imperial Uncle," and let me leave the object on his desk, his turned-down gaze concealing the caution in his eyes. Watching the Dowager Empress do this to a child, I could hardly bear to leave the matter alone, but I also understood. Becoming like this was inevitable once he became the emperor. And thus I no longer visited him in private, and left those items for Kitten and Cafe to pick and choose as they wished. But one day, the Dowager Empress asked me to come to the chambers of the imperial concubines to talk about something, and while I was there I thought I may as well look in on Kijhi. It was rare to find him in his sleeping quarters, but there were only scant few servants waiting on him. The attendant eunuch told me that His Majesty was self-reflecting and the Dowager Empress wanted him to have few attendants. Only then did I recall that, because Kijhi was a bit of a picky eater, a remonstrance official had seized upon this flaw and wrote a memorial criticizing the extravagance of the emperor's daily expenses. I heard Kijhi then decreed that he should reflect on his own shortcomings, and the Dowager Empress also decreed that she should supervise His Majesty's self-reflection. I entered the sleeping chambers to find them all empty. The place was devoid of decorative items, the beautiful painted scenery scroll had been switched out for a few plain grey calligraphy scrolls of poetry about hard work and study. The dragon-embroidered curtain was gone, and in its place was some neither purple nor indigo washed-out cloth from who knows where. A perfectly proper imperial bed-chamber had been turned into a poor scholar's study right out of a novel. It was summer-time. There was an old veil hanging over the 4 pillars of the emperor's bed, with a woven grass mat on the bedboard. A suffering child sat at the edge of the bed dressed in coarsely woven flax clothing, sickly, wan and jaundiced looking, the present son of heaven, my royal nephew. The eunuch told me His Majesty had been studying governance diligently for days, painstakingly reading scroll after scroll, waking at cock-crow and going to bed at midnight, eating only 1 meal of peasant food per day. As he said this he wiped at his eye with a sleeve, and I wondered if he was moved or if he just felt sorry for His Majesty. Sickly Kijhi attempted to put on a show of good spirits when he saw me. "You've come to visit us, Imperial Uncle. Please have a seat." I sat down on a chair cushioned with a grass mat, staring at his sallow face, and just felt so angry. That idiotic woman and those so-called loyalists too, this was exactly what overcompensating meant. Even if they wanted to establish a good reputation, must they go so far as to torment a child for respectability's sake? Even His Majesty can't fill his belly and has to live in a poor man's cave now. How could anyone speak of the prosperity of our dynasty? If I had my way, I'd get them to replace these pretentious furnishings and get the imperial kitchens to send up a good meal. But this was the emperor's chambers, and no matter how much I disapproved of it, I was still a subject. However, right at that moment, the heavens cooperated. Rain clouds gathered, the sky darkened, and there was the first rumbling of thunder. "It's going to rain. Please stay a while longer, Imperial Uncle." It was actually a hint to show me out, but instead I said to him, "Then this servant must thank you for your favor, Your Majesty." I turned to glance at the hourglass. "It's getting late. You should have dinner, Your Majesty. We have been in self-reflection, and only eat one meal per day. We already ate at noon." I made a point of pressing at my belly. "That is something the subject quite admire, Your Majesty. This subject ought to emulate such habits." And as I expected, Kichi said to me, "Imperial Uncle, are you hungry? Let us get dinner prepared for you." I replied immediately, "If Your Majesty isn't going to eat, then this subject certainly can't." The eunuch made a timely interjection and tried to talk him around. "Your Majesty, since His Highness is here, there's no harm in making an exception." Kichi was probably starving. After his attendants persuaded him some more, he nodded. "All right then, let's tell the imperial kitchens to get dinner ready. This subject like wine. May this subject ask Your Majesty for some wine to go with dinner?" Kichi said, "We will allow it." If there was going to be wine, then there would have to be meat. It was likely due to the kitchens of the imperial palace's inability to display their full capacity lately and the boredom making their hands itch that so much effort was put into making this dinner. Even though there were only a dozen or so dishes with 2 soups and 6 kinds of pastries, and the meat was just the ordinary chicken, duck, and fish, the execution of each dish was exquisite and everything was delicious. I focused on eating and pretended not to notice as Kichi calmly and collectedly wolfed down his food. The sky had gone fully dark by the time we finished dinner. A few lamps were lit in the palace chambers, making the room shadowy. After I said goodbye and rose to go, a dazzling flash of lightning crossed the skies without any warning, followed closely by a world-shattering thunderclap. I walked toward the doors and heard Kichi say from behind me, "Imperial Uncle." I turned to find him standing all alone in the great big palace sleeping chambers. Shadows cast by the lamps flickered and superimposed on one another like layer upon layer of ghosts. "Imperial Uncle, the thunderstorm has gotten quite fierce, there's no harm in your staying a bit longer." And so I turned back inside, and told him some of those adventurer tales I knew. I told him one after another. It was getting close to midnight and Kichi still refused to sleep. Outside, the rain kept coming down, and the thunderstorm raged on. A long time ago, during thunderstorms there were often officials and good generals who'd carry a sword to keep night watch for the emperor. "This subject is going to ask for Your Majesty's imperial favor today. This subject's leg has gone bad, so he cannot display loyalty on the battlefield. Please bestow this subject a chance to be a good subject. Let this subject be on night watch for Your Majesty tonight." In the lamplight Kichi's eyes were shining as he looked at me. "We will allow it." The eunuchs placed a mattress on the floor for me, just outside the inner palace hall's door, and Kichi finally went to bed. The eunuchs pulled down the curtain, and I laid down on the mattress. From the other side of the curtain I heard Kichi's young voice say to me, "Imperial Uncle." I replied, "Your subject is here." When Emperor Father passed away. It was also a stormy day like today. Empress Mother told us that he'll come back to visit us. But we never saw him again. Will he really come back to see us? At a time like this, I think, if the spirit of the former emperor really did manifest itself, that would be absolutely terrifying. But words so insulting towards the former emperor could only ever be had as thoughts. The Empress Dowager would never lie to Your Majesty. When this subject's father passed away, Mother told him the same thing. It was a long time before there was a sound of agreement from behind the curtain. It took ages for me to somehow fall asleep. Later on, my staying overnight in the Imperial sleeping quarters landed me many accusations of misconduct from the high-ranking officials, and it became part of the evidence that I was attempting to seize the throne. As that was the state of my reputation at any rate, I just let them say whatever they wanted. Whether Kijhi also thought I was trying to steal the throne when he recalled this incident many years later is hard to say. Everything changes as a person grows up, the same way that the Kijhi I knew that day has become His Majesty of today. All these are uncertain things. Carriages arrive on the shore at nightfall. Lu Tongyi and I respectfully see the Emperor off within the cabin. Kijhi says to me smilingly, "Uncle, you should come home soon too, don't make us worry about you." I reply, "Be careful on your way home." This must look like a scene between harmoniously closely knit family to outsiders. Kijhi says, "Thank you for your hospitality for the past few days, Merchant Mei." Lu Tongyi bows. "You're far too kind." Deng Tan and the rest escort Kijhi into a carriage, and their caravan fades into the night. From behind me, Wang Yu says, "It's gotten late. If there's anything you'd like to eat tonight, Master, this lowly one will get it arranged." "Steward Wang, you're a guest. I should be the one to cover such expenses," Lu Tongyi says, and orders a room set aside for Wang Yu. "Oh no, I shan't inconvenience you, Merchant Mei. I'd better just stay with Master and wait on him, otherwise I'll get in trouble with my master at home." Lu Tongyi smiles. "Never mind, then." Standing on the deck, I look towards the Wan ship stopped next to us, gloriously lit. I can barely make out two silhouettes through an open window, drinking and watching a dance. It's Yunzhe and Yunyu. After dinner, Lu Tongyi tells me that he needs to check over the accounts for the silk deal and asks if I have any time. He also turns to Wang Yu, "Steward Wang, please help Merchant Zhao check over it as well and see if I've made any mistakes in my calculations. An underling like myself can't rightly meddle in Master's business, Merchant Mei, you jest. This lowly one will be right outside. Just holler if you need any tea." Lu Tongyi closes the door and produces a letter from his sleeve. He dips a finger in some tea and writes the name Zhongbing on the table. I take it from him, open it, and find scant few lines on the page. "Your Highness, Prince Huai, of that past incident, I have found out all that is knowable. May we go on in peace, and the empire remain secure." That scares me. Zhongbing is really something else, that he managed to dig up information about a thing like that. But why did he give me this letter? Lu Tongyi takes the letter and puts it to the flame. I look on as the last shred of paper becomes ash. I won't be able to interfere, soon enough. He'll just have to keep worrying about what he ought to worry about. Lu Tongyi pours some tea into the plate with the ash, opens a window, and pours the water out. He closes the window again. Steward Wang is here too. He's worried I don't leave thoroughly enough and sent him to keep an eye on me. We'll be in Suzhou by tomorrow. What are your immediate plans, Merchant Zhao? I think about this, then tell him, Merchant Mei, there is something I'd like to shamelessly ask for your help with once more. Is that all right? Lu Tongyi looks at me without a word. And so I continue, once in Suzhou I'm going to rent a carriage and go directly to the coast. I may never come back again. These past years I've been running all over doing business, so I have a bit of stuff that I can't take with me. I'd like you to take it from me. If anything is useful, and you don't mind, please do keep it. As for what isn't useful to you, if you can give it away, do so, and get rid of the rest. I don't think you've brought a lot in your luggage onto the ship. Why don't you take it overseas? I don't have much luggage, it's true, but there's that shop front in Chengzhou. Please hold onto it in my stead. I have a few banknotes here that are exchangeable anywhere within the empire. They can't be used outside, and I can't take that much gold and silver with me. Maybe you can hold onto them for me, and whenever Prince Dai runs out of money again, you can give them to him. No one really has a use for my things. Other things. I guess there's nothing else. Lu Tongyi's brows furrow. I'm afraid I can't agree to that. I never thought he'd refuse, and I'm taken aback. Merchant Zhao, we're not that close, but you always entrust your family matters with me. I just think it's inappropriate. Don't you think it'd be better if you found someone else you can trust and entrust these things to? Feeling suddenly awkward, I force a laugh. Merchant May, you're right. I have troubled you too much. Come to think of it, though I've managed to live to be 32, my life has truly been a failure. Decades in the imperial court, more than 3 years out in the world, and still when there is something I need to entrust someone with, I rack my brains and the only person I can come up with is Lu Tongyi. But why would he ever have to agree to what I ask of him? Is it just because he's a gentleman that I think he must agree? That really is some faulty reasoning. Once I realize this, I find myself stumbling over my words. Merchant May. It was my fault for not planning things well. Just pretend I never said anything. Lu Tongyi gives me a smile. If you can't get a carriage in Suzhou, I can arrange for one. I cup one hand in my fist. Thank you. I return to my cabin, nothing seems amiss next door on the Wan ship. The night passes uneventfully till dawn. End chapter. Imperial Uncle. Chapter 53. As we close in on Suzhou, I finish packing my luggage in the cabin and it occurs to me that a farewell at the wharf may be too hurried. It may be best if I say goodbye to Lu Tongyi before we get there. I don't find Lu Tongyi in the cabin sitting room. As I'm about to go check his room, footsteps come down the hall. He's come out of his room, and to my surprise he has a jug of wine and wine cups. I seldom see him with wine. Lu Tongyi places the jug and cups onto the table. I'm not a good drinker, but I know you like wine, that's why I had a passable jug prepared so we can properly say goodbye. He fills the cups, and raises one. Please take care of yourself. I pick up the other cup, it feels like it weighs 1,000 caddies. I've always given you trouble in so many ways I fear I'll never be able to repay you fully in this lifetime. Please take care of yourself as well. I drain my cup. Lu Tongyi knocks back his drink. I laugh. Judging by how quickly you drank that just now, your alcohol tolerance must not be as humble as the way you've always put it. If it's still early in the day, I really would like to seriously drink with you and see who of us passes out first. Lu Tongyi shakes his head, smiling. I really can't drink. A few, I can manage, but more than 3 taels and I won't be able to find my way home. The ship slows gradually and enters the Suzhou port. The ship comes to a stop. A young servant comes in to tell Lu Tongyi that Ruhi's carriages have already arrived, they're waiting on the shore. If the Wans don't have carriages ready, then you may go ahead and pick out a couple of them, Merchant Zhao, use them with the younger Wan and Steward Wang. The Wans don't have a residence in Suzhou, so if you don't want to stay in an inn, I do own a house here and it's decently peaceful. If you don't mind, you can stay there for tonight. Wang Yu interrupts, there's no need for that, my master already made transportation arrangements for his uncle. Wang Yu and Ruhi's servants step out of the cabin to carry my luggage for me. In the rays of the setting sun, someone is standing alone on the neighboring ship's deck. We face each other, and in a moment I raise my hand. Take good care of yourself. He doesn't say anything at all. Slowly, he turns around, and heads back into the cabin. I step off the sampan onto the wharf. Lu Tongyi is standing in front of the Ruhi carriages, looking at me with a complicated and puzzled expression. I give him a quick smile. Merchant May, it really is farewell, this time. But now that this moment has finally come, I somehow can't find anything to say. In the end, all I have are just those 2 words, take care. Wang Yu brings a carriage over. I climb on board and it jolts along the road. Wang Yu says respectfully to me, Your Highness, His Majesty wanted me to tell you that if there's any place that you haven't let go of and want to see, you can travel freely for the next few days. There's not really anywhere, I tell him. But I did mention I was going overseas, so let's make a trip to the shore. Wang Yu tells me, as you will, and ducks his head outside to give the driver instructions. I glance at the blue cloth-wrapped bundle next to him. Let me see that. At any rate it's for my use. Wang Yu hesitates for a second, then shakily hands me the bundle. I open it to find a blue porcelain jar. It's cool to the touch, and when I tap it, it makes a clean, silvery sound. It's good porcelain. Back in the day when Kijhi, Kitten, and the young princes came to the Prince Huai estate, in a bout of mischief they'd bang the great big vase in the hall like a drum, and it used to make a sound just like that. And as they beat it they'd call out all the while, "Uncle, Uncle." When Kijhi met with me alone that day, inside that room he also first called out to me, "Imperial Uncle." And after he called me he asked me, "Imperial Uncle, what am I to do? When we found out how terribly you were wronged, we blamed thyself. We know you just wanted the best for us. And now that things have come to this, can you tell me, Imperial Uncle, what should we do?" Yeah, what should he do? His Majesty has already declared a perfectly proper penitential decree, a tomb has been built, a memorial tablet has been raised, but the one who should be sleeping inside is running about jumping up and down very much alive. What's he to do? Prince Huai is already dead, the only one in the world is nothing more than. Kijhi raises a hand. Enough, Imperial Uncle. Let's not repeat that lie, thinking that it can fool anyone. You're standing right here. Even if your name is third dog or fourth cat, you're still my Imperial Uncle. I immediately say, Your Majesty, you mustn't ever make that analogy. It's fine for me to be called third dog or fourth cat, but if His Majesty becomes third dog or fourth cat's nephew, now that would really be. Kijhi sighs, and stares at me. It's the same look he used to have in his eyes when he was little and really wanted something. Your Majesty, this time I'd planned to go overseas, and I won't ever be coming back. Kijhi still says nothing. I continue, if, say, I run into a storm on the sea and the ship accidentally sinks, then there really would be nothing more to worry about. Kijhi finally opens his mouth and tells me, enunciating every word, Imperial Uncle, don't blame us. And he produces a small bottle from his sleeve. I take it from him. The bottle is made of jade, and because Kijhi has been keeping it in his sleeve, it's warm. Kijhi has seldom given me things. From the time he was little, until now, it was always him who took things from me. I hold onto it and say to him, "Thank you, Your Majesty, for bestowing me this gift." Kijhi heaves another sigh. "However, Your Majesty, can this not happen on Lu Tongyi's ship?" Kijhi says slowly, "The effects of this drug take a few days to show, don't worry. Imperial Uncle, would you rather come with me back to the capital, or? Too many people know me in the capital. It's best if this is taken care of away from there." I uncork the bottle. What's inside is a liquid. It's a bit bitter. Kijhi turns away from me, and after a moment, he says, "Imperial Uncle, we promise you that your imperial tomb remains yours." The carriage wobbles, I place the jar back into the bundle. Wang Yu is going to take me back to that great tomb with it? His voice is hoarse. "Your Highness, don't you worry. His Majesty decided on that jar personally. This lowly one may be getting on in years, but my hands are still quite steady. This lowly one will surely to bring you to the underground palace, safe and sound." I make no reply, and lying down inside the carriage, I doze off for a while. I recall what happened after I drank that bottle of poison on the ship. I asked to be excused, and Kijhi turned back to me. "Uncle, stay here and talk to me a while." Then Kijhi and I talked for a long time. We didn't talk about anything important, just bits and pieces of the inconsequential things that happened in the palace over the years, such as which tree in the palace was planted personally by the former emperor, what happened when he planted it, and so on. He said, "We remember all that happened when we were little and went to Imperial Uncle's place to play." He said, "We will always remember how good you were to us, Imperial Uncle." These words were said like they were a part of an everyday conversation. He said, "We've never said anything like this to anyone, and we will never say it again." And I told him, "Your Majesty, don't have to put it that way." To make a perfectly disrespectful analogy, relationships between members of ordinary families are closer than those between royalties. Take Prince Dai, for example. He took from the Prince Huai estate until I was nearly broke, but whenever he came over and called me Imperial Uncle, I still had to lend him spending money. That's just how things are supposed to be. The Prince Huai estate was seized when I was arrested. All those things my father brought back years ago, the curios I purchased myself as a young man, and the decorative items and ornaments my mother used to love when she was still alive were either destroyed, confiscated, or stolen during the seizure. 2 years ago, when I was peddling sheepskin in the desert, I lost a drinking match with some herdsmen and threw up for half the night. I caught a cold too, and was running a fever. While I was half conscious, I thought I was lying on my bed in my bedroom in the old estate, and my mom had brought me sobering soup. She was giving me a talking to while feeding me. But it tasted like plain water on my tongue. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was wrapped in a sheepskin coat, sleeping on horse hide. There was a young lady next to me with a crude porcelain bowl, feeding me cool water. She was ordinary looking, with reddish-brown skin and rough hands, but her eyes were bright and clear, entirely without impurity, clean. When she smiled at me, showing me her white teeth, I thought she looked just like an immortal. That girl was Alana. When I was leaving, she told me she was going to marry some young man who was exceedingly good at horseback riding. She probably has a child by now. The carriage wobbles along, I sleep for a while, and sometimes I dream of Kijhi talking to me, sometimes it's Alana, it's Mei Shi, Shui, Wan Wan. Finally, it is a woman named Xingniang I met in some small city where I stayed for a while, who had a noodle stand at the mouth of an alleyway. Back then I couldn't be bothered to cook, and I would take a small pot to her stand every day to buy some noodles with shredded chicken. It would make a meal at noon, and I'd add some water to the rest in the evening and drink it like porridge as another meal. She would always give me extra, filling that small pot up to the brim. She told me that her man was dead, left her behind with 2 kids who'd just learned to walk. She said she wasn't looking for a lot in life, she just wanted to find someone again, who can support her and her children. She said she'd be good to that someone with all her heart. When she told me that, I think she was probably insinuating something, but unfortunately I didn't stay in that city for long. Before I left, I wanted to give her some money, but she said she only spent money she earned herself. Only then did I realize that she was the one looking after me all along, and I wasn't the one doing her a favor. In the dream I am selling noodles with her in that alleyway. She's rolling out the dough while I watch the pot. The water boils, I open the lid and the steam rises up to my face. There is a child at my feet, pulling at my gown, calling out, "Adai, Adai." The carriage abruptly jolts. I wake. Wang Yu's hoarse voice says, "Your Highness, we're here." End chapter. Imperial Uncle. Chapter 54. The carriage stops, and I step off to see a clamorous wharf before me, big ships moored by the shore, a large crowd coming and going, and heaps of merchandise piled everywhere. I thought I'd be able to see waves stretching out to an endless horizon, but contrary to my expectations, it's an inlet. A boatman transporting goods on the shore tells me that if one wishes to build a great big harbor, one needs an inlet, but the ocean is just beyond. I stare off towards the area outside of the bay, and Wang Yu says quietly behind me, "Master, you can rent a sampan and go see." This lowly one can't decide on much more than that. I make a calculation, time is probably almost up. Compared to the 2 days before, my head feels obviously heavier and my steps just a tad unsteady. There is a numbness in my limbs. I wonder if it's going to be tonight, or tomorrow. Though the wise and learned can see the world from a single grain of sand, facing the little inlet before me, I still want to go have a look. Maybe if I wait any longer it'll all be gone. At the very least, in the moment, something exists. I walk around the harbor and find a small boat that moves goods from the shore to the ships, but the boatman refuses to take me no matter what. He says he's accepted a job from the big ship and he mustn't tarry. Even Wang Yu's attempt to grease his palms proves futile. It's not like I simply won't take the job, but I've already accepted work, so it can't wait. We do long-term work, not one-off jobs. Many apologies, Guvnor. Speaking plainly, he means he can't afford to offend a big client over this bit of small business. While we're talking, the big client's big ship approaches us slowly and anchors by the shore. I spy the name on the huge sign at its prow, Ruhi. Someone who looks like a steward comes down from the ship and bows to me. Merchant Zhao, what a coincidence to run into you again. Our master is right up on the ship, please come aboard. I step onto the ship and see Lu Tongyi standing in front of the hold. Merchant Mei, did you bring enough wine onto the ship this time? I ask him. Lu Tongyi gives Wang Yu behind me a look, and me a smile. Of course there's wine. There is someone in the cabin who'd like a word with you, Merchant Zhao. Lu Tongyi and I step inside the cabins together. He guides me to a cabin door, and pushes the door open after knocking twice. I go inside, and the door is softly closed behind me. I can hear Lu Tongyi's footsteps retreating into the distance. The man standing before the window turns around and cups one fist at me. Your Highness. It's Yunze. The only reason I came on Chancellor Liu's ship was to come say thank you to your Highness. Thank you for the kindness you've shown the Yun family. I shouldn't accept this thanks from you, Sir Yun. From the very start what I did was never for the sake of the Yuns. Some things are best left in the past. Whatever has already been buried, let it become dust. You may rest easy, your Highness. My younger brother has already decided to roam the world with me. From now on there won't be any more Yuns. I just want to be content with my lot and be a businessman. There was little in terms of relationship or dispute between us in the past, and there won't be any in the future either. My brother has come to terms with things. But the fact that we've implicated your Highness and made it necessary for you to live overseas from now on, that is a fault I feel rather difficult to bear. What I must deal with now has little to do with that particular incident. This is just how imperial politics go. Imperial families have always valued power, and what benefits them more, the idea of familial love, is extraneous to begin with. That reminds me, my younger brother wanted me to tell your Highness something. First is that he asked you not to worry, and the second is about what your Highness asked him about that day. He said he also doesn't know what the answer is. At first it was fake, and even if what's fake became real, in the end it was still fake. Then, Sir Yun, please take these words to him for me as well. I have always been very fond of him. Whether he is Yun Yu or the younger one, tell him to take care of himself. Yunze clasps his hands together and bows to me, exiting the cabin. I stand in the room alone, an ice-cold chilliness spreading outwards from my heart as though I'm standing in the snow. 10 odd years ago, I was picking up my nephews one by one to break off plum blossom branches. In the end, when I was about to pick up one of the children, a eunuch from the palace said to me, Your Highness, that's Chancellor Yun's son. He's not a prince. I no longer remember what that particular child looked like. But he remembers this incident quite clearly. Back then, you snapped a plum branch for me, and I had to kowtow and say, Thank you, Your Highness. But surely, I was the same as they were. End chapter.